Hello, I'm JayJen, and I recently became number 1 in Ice Collection on Hypixel Skyblock. The story I am about to tell is one that spans across the course of 2 years, costing thousands of hours, billions of coins, and nearly my sanity. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the true story of the Great Ice War. It all started in the summer of 2022. I was just an ordinary Skyblock player, just trying to progress. At this stage in the game, I was still an early game player, but I've been playing Skyblock long enough to know my limits. In fact, Skyblock is inherently designed to remind you every day that no matter how much you play, you're always at a disadvantage. Back then, the strongest gear in the game was locked behind dungeons, and at the time you needed a team to do dungeons. This is all fine and dandy, but there was just one small problem. I was a solo player, and there was no way I could ever get a set of Necron armor or a Hyperion, which were the strongest and most coveted items in the game. So I decided to settle for the next best thing, Frozen Blaze armor. Coupled with a legendary Blaze pet, Frozen Blaze is arguably one of the strongest sets in the game. And the best thing about it is, you don't need luck or RNG, as it's completely craftable. All I needed was Blaze Rod Collection 7, and a lot of Blaze Rods to craft Blaze armor. Then, I needed Ice Collection 9, and a boatload of ice to upgrade Blaze armor into Frozen Blaze armor. So I immediately got to work, and put up Blaze minions for a few months, and swapped them out for Ice minions. A few months went by, and I finally had the resources to craft a legendary Blaze pet and Frozen Blaze. I was all set, and was ready to take on the more difficult Skyblock content. At this point, I really didn't need my Ice minions anymore, but I made the choice to leave them up a little while longer. You see, I made it to the stage in the game where I could start using my minions to make money. The goal was to make a lot of ice, then sell a lot of ice. Then I would use that revenue to purchase the resources needed to unlock more minion slots. I did this for several weeks until I unlocked my 29th minion slot. Over time, I noticed I was climbing up the Ice Collection leaderboards. In just a few short months, I made it into the top 400 in Ice Collection. Suddenly, a surge of inspiration and pig-like motivation struck me. Being a fan of Technoblade, I saw the Great Potato War series, which were already several years old at this point. I knew engaging in a collection war today would be more difficult to pull off, given how much the game has evolved over the years. But not only that, I started playing Skyblock much later, which instantly put me at a severe disadvantage against OG players. Nevertheless, I was confident and determined to give it a shot. Before going for number 1 in a collection, there are a few minor details you must know. For one, you have to know who you're going up against. And number 2, you need to know how strong the competition is. I didn't have the slightest clue on either, so I spent some time engaging in open source intelligence gathering. I found a website dedicated to Skyblock leaderboards, which was made possible through the use of API. At the time, the player who was listed first in the Ice Collection leaderboards was a player by the name of Leafman11. According to the data on the leaderboards, Leafman had a lead on me of 200 million blocks of ice. But this wasn't the most shocking thing that I found. I discovered that almost half of the players in the top 10 were all in the same guild. This guild consisted of the strongest ice makers in all of Skyblock, and their objective was simple, yet clear nonetheless. The guild was aptly named the Ice Addicts and consisted of these players. Applying my OSINT skills, I quickly identified the mastermind and leader of Skyblock's largest ice guild. It was none other than the man at the top of the leaderboard himself, Leafman. Data that I collected in Skycrypt showed Leafman had 30 minion slots, but unfortunately, API didn't provide sufficient data for me to determine how strong Leafman's ice game was. So, I decided to dig deeper. I needed to do recon, but I felt the mission was too risky to perform on my main account, so I jumped on my alt account and visited Leafman's island. What I saw shocked me to the very core. Not only did Leafman have 30 tier 11 ice minions, but he built Avarantha. Now that I had a slightly better idea of what I was getting myself into, my analysis of the situation was showing that my chances of success was rather bleak. I only had 29 tier 11 ice minions, and my ice minions were a long way off from being fully optimized. If I was going to take number 1, my minion setup wasn't going to cut it. At a bare minimum, I needed to match the strength of the competition's minion output, which would require me to unlock the 30th minion slot. But to unlock the 30th minion slot, I needed to get to Enderman Slayer 4 to make it happen. Locked behind Enderman Slayer 4 is the Voidling minion, and this minion was just the thing I needed to unlock my 30th minion slot. At the time, I was too weak to take down a tier 2 Void Gloom, so for the next couple of days, I forced myself to do nothing but Enderman Slayer. 7,500 Zealot Bruisers and 300 tier 1 Void Glooms later, I finally reached Enderman Slayer 4, unlocking the Voidling minion and eventually my 30th minion slot. With 30 tier 11 ice minions, each with an enchanted lava bucket, a super compactor 3000, and a minion expander, I was making 243,000 blocks of ice per day. I was proud of what I had just accomplished, but in that moment, little did I know that the grind was about to ramp up in difficulty. As I was celebrating my first of many milestones, the unexpected happened. The holiday update. With the holiday update came a new ice essence shop, new sea creatures, and new zones. But the most interesting change with this update was the introduction of a new NPC named Einery. Einery introduced a new currency called North Stars, which can be used to purchase new items in Einery's Emporium, such as talismans, snow equipment, a reindeer pet, but most importantly, Tier 12 Ice Minions. A Tier 12 Ice Minion is a full second faster than its Tier 11 variant, so I needed to upgrade all of my ice minions to tier 12 as soon as possible. But there was a catch. To get a single tier 11 ice minion to tier 12, it costs 300 North Stars, 1 million coins, and 16 stacks of enchanted ice. The coins and the ice weren't a problem. The biggest challenge that lied ahead was getting the North Stars. North Stars are obtained by opening gifts with other players. Opening red gifts is the quickest way to get North Stars, but because everyone was after the new items in Einery's Emporium, it caused the price of red gifts to skyrocket, so they were out of the question. I soon discovered that I could get more bang for my buck by opening green gifts. They weren't super expensive, and they were easy to get with just a few hours of mining in the glacial caves. After I got about 16 stacks of green gifts, I would find a player in the lobby who was interested in trading a bunch of green gifts with me, which essentially cut my time grinding for green gifts in half. I did this every day for the whole month of December, until finally on Christmas Day, I accomplished my goal and had all tier 12 ice minions. Although my ice minions had reached the highest possible level, my minions were still a long way off from being fully optimized. Each of my minions only had these items, and I needed these to hypermax my minions. After mining a lot of mithril in the Dwarven mines for a few days, I had the materials needed to craft a beacon. It took a few extra weeks to get my beacon to tier 5, as I needed Heart of the Mountain 5, a lot of enchanted mithril, and plasma, which is a rare crafting item that drops from ghosts. I soon had a tier 5 beacon, but it didn't take me long to realize that I was going to need plenty of fuel to power my beacon. It takes power crystals to power the beacon, which can be created in the forge with 256 starfall. You can get starfall from these mobs in the Dwarven mines. There is, however, one additional method of obtaining starfall, which I found to be the most efficient, and it's by joining a cult. The Cult of the Fallen Star shows up every 7th in-game day between the hours of 12 to 6 a.m. in this hidden room. And if you wear this helmet and talk to this guy, you'll get 200 starfall at no cost. After attending hundreds of these meetings, I was able to forge enough power crystals to power my beacon for more than a year. So that took care of the beacon and fuel. Next, I needed mithril infusion. To craft mithril infusion, you need 8 stacks of enchanted mithril and a magma bucket. Pause. Okay, let's take a moment here and talk about the rarity of this thing. Enchanted mithril is a rare item, and a magma bucket is a legendary item. If you combine these items, you get an epic mithril infusion, right? Wrong! You get an uncommon mithril infusion. It makes no sense! Okay, rant over. I went back to grinding a ton of mithril, and what ice I made from my minions, I sold to the bazaar to buy magma buckets. After a few weeks, I was able to get mithril infusion applied to all of my minions. Shortly after, another massive game-changing update came to Skyblock. The Garden Update. I still needed plasma buckets and flycatchers, and the timing of the Garden Update could not have been better. You see, the Garden Update caused the price of certain farming-related items to skyrocket, as everyone was seeking them for the Garden Update. Among those items were Harvesting 6 books and Farming for Dummies. Back when Technoblade was the mayor of Skyblock, there was a Shiny Pigs event which had the chance to drop these books. As luck would have it, I collected several double chests full of these books and was sitting on a gold mine. I sold these books to the bazaar at peak price and was able to make around 1 billion coins, which was enough coins to replace my enchanted lava buckets with plasma buckets and to buy 30 flycatchers. For the first time since I ventured out on becoming number 1, my ice minions were just as strong as the leading competition. As big of a feat as this was, I was still lacking a competitive edge. I didn't want my ice output to be equal to that of the competition. I wanted a superior ice minion farm, and the only way I could accomplish that is to do the one thing that very few in the ice race had done at that point: unlock the 31st minion slot. To unlock the 31st minion slot, I would have to unlock the tier 12 variants of both the mining and farming minions. The farming minions required a lot of pelt grinding, and the mining minions required a ton of coins. Even after crafting the tier 12 variants, I was still shy of unlocking the 31st minion slot. My quest for the 31st minion slot led me to a place that is the literal antithesis of ice: the Crimson Isle. Not only could you get the nether-themed minions to tier 12, but there were 2 new minions that you can get by gaining faction reputation. The Mycelium minion, which you can get from the Mage faction, and the Red Sand minion, which you can get from the Barbarian faction. But to craft a tier 12 Mycelium and Red Sand minion would require 12,000 reputation from both factions on the Crimson Isle. So I had to get one faction to 12,000 reputation, craft its tier 12 minion, then betray that faction by joining the other faction, and get 12,000 reputation with that faction so I could craft its tier 12 minion. So I spent the next 2 months working on my faction levels until I finally had both minions, which unlocked my 31st minion slot. My 31st tier 12 ice minion was up, and I was producing 405,000 blocks of ice per day. At this rate, I was steadily climbing up the ice collection leaderboards, but not as fast as I had hoped or had anticipated. I was still significantly trailing the members of the Ice Addicts Guild. If I wanted to catch up with the rest of the pack, I couldn't rely on minions alone. As I stared into the eyes of inevitability, I knew exactly what I had to do. My ice minions were hypermaxed, but it wasn't enough. It was time to take matters into my own hands. As I was looking into ways of increasing ice collection, I started to realize how limited my options truly were. The best way to manually increase ice collection is by mining ice in the glacial caves. But the problem with that is Jerry's workshop is only accessible in the late winter, which is only 12% out of the entire Skyblock year. Mining in the glacial caves wasn't a problem, but I needed a way to manually mine ice while the winter island is inaccessible the other 88% of the time. Excluding ice minions, my research showed that there are 4 different ways of obtaining ice outside of Jerry's workshop. I know some of you are probably thinking, what about Frostwalker, JayJen? Doesn't that count towards ice collection? And the answer to that question is an unequivocal no. Since I'm on the subject of Frostwalker, when the hot springs were added to Skyblock, there was a brief time that Frostwalker could be used to permanently turn the hot springs into ice. It was a glitch that was quickly patched, of course, but when it was a thing, it did count towards ice collection. How do I know this? I may or may not have been the one breaking the hot springs. Sorry, I'm getting slightly off topic here. Let's continue. These are the 4 methods for increasing ice collection, but the most superior method out of the 4 is the Taiga Biome Stick. With the Taiga Biome Stick, you can change the biome of your private island into a taiga which is the only biome in Skyblock in which water can freeze into ice. Hypothetically, if I placed a lot of water on my private island and converted my island into a taiga, I could generate a ton of ice right on my island. The potential for ice generation was no laughing matter. However, this method for generating ice has two intrinsic flaws. The first and obvious flaw is it takes time for water to freeze. And two, once I mine the ice block, that source water is gone and has to be placed back down again. On the bright side, placing down water in Skyblock is made more efficient with items such as the magical water bucket and the Prisma pump. Although these items help tremendously with water placement, I would still be losing a ton of time by waiting for water to freeze and by having to manually place down water in between mining cycles. I needed to find a way to reduce the amount of time I spent not mining ice. Unfortunately, there's no way to speed up the time it takes for water to freeze, but if I could figure out a way to automate water placement in real time while I mine ice, all I needed to do was make an ice farm large enough that by the time I got to the end of the farm, I would have freshly generated ice to mine at the beginning of the farm. And with that, I could mine ice without ever having to stop. I immediately got to work and maxed out my island size through Elizabeth. While I was testing water mechanics with Prisma pumps, I stumbled across an elegant yet simple solution for automating water placement. All I had to do is make sure I had permanent water sources all along two adjacent sides of a square or rectangle, and the area of that shape will automatically fill up with water sources. With this concept, I now had a way to mine ice without ever having to stop, and with that, it was time to build the ice farm. My ice farm was completed, and there was only one thing left to do. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the ice box. This farm generates a whopping 37,600 blocks of ice. You'll notice that I purposely left a gap in the center of my island, in which I'll explain why later. But for now, I bought a stonk and enchanted it with Silk Touch and Compact, which does count towards collection when procced. Although the stonk is designed to be used on endstone, its rarity and efficiency made it the best choice for mining ice. For the next few days, I spent my time fine-tuning the icebox and making it more efficient. I also maxed out the Compact enchant on my stonk to Compact 10. Despite all of this, the amount of ice I was mining was barely enough to be noticeable. It's too bad that Mining Fortune doesn't work on ice. Or does it? Skyblock has a stat called Mining Fortune, which increases your chances of getting more ores. Mining Fortune is a useful stat, but unfortunately, Mining Fortune only works on ores. In Update 0.18.3, Hypixel made a subtle change which allowed Mining Fortune to work on ice, but the caveat is it only works on the Winter Island. Unfortunately for me, the icebox is on my island, so that change didn't benefit me there. After doing some additional research with Mining Fortune, I discovered there was a pet in the game that grants Mining Fortune for non-ores, and with ice being a non-ore, this pet would boost my ice output regardless of where I was mining it. I needed this pet, and fast, so my quest for this pet took me back once again to the Crimson Isle, but this time with a shovel. Locked behind Red Sand Collection is the Snail Pet. The epic and legendary variants of the Snail Pet has a perk called Slow Moving, which converts speed into Mining Fortune for non-ores. But to craft the Snail Pet, I needed 2 stacks of enchanted red sand and 128 burning eyes, which drop from flaming spiders. After getting the items needed for the Snail Pet, I crafted a legendary variant and immediately went to work getting it to level 100. At level 100, the Snail Pet converts half of your speed over the base stat of 100 into Mining Fortune for non-ores. This caps out at 400 Mining Fortune for non-ores, which meant I could get a maximum of 5 blocks of ice with each block of ice that I break. But to get maximum Mining Fortune for non-ores, I needed to get 900 speed. The first thing I did is I got all of the talismans that increase speed. Then I turned my attention to armor. The best armor for speed is this combination, but there were 2 problems with it. One, the racing helmet is a Shin special item, which means the helmet is outrageously expensive, so it was out of the budget and out of the question. And 2, Maxor's leggings is achievement locked, requiring a floor 7 dungeons completion. As a reminder, I'm a solo player, so that wasn't happening either. So I settled on the next best thing. The amazing thing about this armor combination is 3/4 of this armor is obtainable from the Dragon's Nest, and the pieces are rather affordable. But the Rancher's Boots, on the other hand, is a different story. The Rancher's Boots is a farming armor piece, and what makes it so special is it grants 50 speed, in addition to 4 speed per farming level. When maxed out, the Rancher's Boots grants a total of 290 speed, making it the meta for speed. To be completely transparent, farming was one of the skills that I neglected for quite a while because I really didn't find it interesting. Nevertheless, the Rancher's Boots were the kick in the pants I needed to work on my farming skill. So I went to work and spent the next month farming in the garden. Much to my surprise, I found farming more enjoyable than I originally thought. In fact, I got so sidetracked leveling up all of my farming tools and participating in Jacob's contests that I forgot about ice in that month of farming. Nevertheless, I acquired a pair of Rancher's Boots and reached farming level 60. With that, it was time to say goodbye to the garden and move on to the next phase. It was summer of 2023, and I finally had the armor pieces I needed to maximize my ice output with the Snail Pet. So I applied the light reforge on all 4 pieces, in addition to enchanting my rancher's boots with Sugar Rush 3. For equipment, I used the snow equipment from Einery's Emporium and applied the flowering reforge on it for more speed. For my snail pet, I applied a spooky cupcake for 20 more speed. Lastly, I chose the sweet power stone with the thaumaturgist and set all of my tuning points to speed. With all of that though, I still wasn't quite at 900 speed, but I did have enough speed that consuming a god pot would put me well over the edge. I had put off mining ice by hand for too long, and it was time to confine myself to the icebox. Because I would be spending most of my time on my private island, I moved my minions to that empty gap I left open. Since my island was already converted to a taiga biome, I could use a gimmicked layout that was popularized by Skyblock YouTuber Imploded. In a gimmicked layout, water and minion expanders are used, which increases ice minion output by as much as 40%. But there is a catch. It only works if the island is loaded, and the ice minion's time between actions cannot be any lower than 3.5 seconds. Anything faster than 3.5 seconds, and the gimmick is rendered useless. Using hypermaxed ice minions with the gimmicked layout, the time between actions was sitting at 3.6 seconds. However, I had to keep a close eye on Cole's perk Prospection, which increases mining minion speed by 25%. With my ice minions moved over to their new location, I started to mine ice. With the icebox, I was averaging 250,000 blocks of ice per hour. I was climbing up the ice collection leaderboards fast and reached the top 50 in just a matter of weeks. At this point, I disabled my API and continued to mine ice. While I mined ice, I kept track of the leaderboards by taking snapshots with the Wayback Machine. No, not that Wayback Machine. This Wayback Machine. I was making great progress, but the data I was capturing with the Wayback Machine was revealing something disturbing. A newcomer was surging up the leaderboards and would soon emerge as the new frontrunner in ice collection. Macash is well known in the Skyblock mining community and has a reputation for being a mining sweat. Macash was dominating the ice collection leaderboards, but not for reasons you might think. At the time, Macash was number 2 in mining XP and was engaged in a battle of his own against the player in first, Lucas. After the holiday update was released, ice minions became the meta for mining XP, which is what Macash used in this campaign to take number 1 in mining XP. Macash was a wealthy player, which allowed him to dump billions of coins on hyper catalysts for his ice minions. Macash would let his ice minions fill up with a ton of ice and would wait until Derpy was mayor to collect all of his ice with the silverfish pet to maximize his mining XP gains. Because Macash had a steady supply of hypercatalysts, he was gaining 200 million blocks of ice every time Derpy was elected mayor. Macash was on track to overtaking the top spot on the ice collection leaderboards, and on August 21st of 2023, that's exactly what he did. Despite Macash having a very strong ice game, there was a silver lining. Macash didn't care about ice collection, and he wasn't mining ice by hand. He only cared about overflow mining XP, and because of this, catching up to Macash was still possible. It wouldn't be easy, but according to the math, I could catch up in just under 2 Derpy cycles, which was 240 days away. But the bad news for me was, the math only worked by changing 2 variables. One, I needed to replace the plasma buckets on my ice minions with a multiplicative fuel source. Catalyst and hypercatalysts were too expensive, so I settled on tasty cheese, which was not only cost efficient, but doubled my minion output. And the second variable was, I needed to squeeze in 1600 hours of ice mining. So for the next 240 days, I mined nothing but ice. Fortuitously enough, the Mithril Crystal, which was broken for the longest time, was finally patched in 0.19.5 and worked on all mining minions as intended. I put one up, which gave my ice minions an additional 10% boost in speed. I kept mining ice, and at the halfway point in December, I nearly caught up to Macash, but with Derpy's arrival, Macash increased his lead yet again by another 200 million blocks of ice. However, Macash later revealed in a livestream that he was only number 2 in ice, which meant the player in first had their API disabled. But with 800 hours of ice mining completed, I was still on schedule. The gap was closing, and I was only 120 days away from catching up. It was spring of 2024. Somehow, I was able to pull off mining ice for 1600 hours in under 240 days. In doing so, I surpassed Macash, becoming number 2 in ice collection. This was his reaction when he found out he lost his spot.
Or just any other stats. Most I'll do is show me collections. Oh yes, 4th in Mithril, 4th in ice. Have I gone down in ice again? God, yes, I know you're a viewer, U1Z.
With the threat of Macash neutralized, there was now only one player standing between me and the summit. But what I didn't realize was, my 240-day push to overtake Macash was just a warm-up for what lied ahead, and the real battle was only beginning. Little did I know that the final stretch would be by far the most difficult, and would push my time investment to its limits. So much so that I wouldn't see a position change in over 300 days. There was one player remaining, a player whose identity was a complete mystery. I needed to track down this player, so I scoured the Hypixel forums, YouTube, and Reddit to see if I could find any leads on who was number 1 in ice collection, but all of the trails led nowhere. Our mystery player was a ghost and clearly didn't want to be found, so I gave up the search and just kept mining. A few more weeks went by, and I was rapidly approaching the 1 billion milestone. I was still number 2 in ice, but I was optimistic that the 1 billion milestone hadn't been crossed yet. But as I drew closer to the milestone, my optimism faded to disappointment. On June 24th, 2024, I reached 1 billion, but I was still number 2. I was the second player to join the 1 billion club, and to be quite honest, the achievement was underwhelming. I invested so much time mining ice, and managed to become the dark horse. But for what? My efforts to take number 1 only got me this far, and without knowing where the finish line was, or if I was getting any closer to it, I started to question if it was worth continuing down this path. In essence, I had reached the lowest point on the Dunning-Kruger effect. After pondering on it for a day, I decided to take a break from ice. Because I had been mining ice for a while, I missed out on a lot of new Skyblock content, and I really didn't know where to begin. Ultimately, I decided to pursue Heart of the Mountain 10. I didn't know it at the time, but this decision would pay off immensely in just a few months. For the next several days, I did nothing but mining commissions and crystal nucleus runs until I reached Heart of the Mountain 10. It was a good distraction and helped me get my mind off ice. That is, until I arrived at the Dwarven base camp. I tried to ignore what I was seeing, but it quickly proved to be impossible. It was as if the icebox was calling out to me through these very tunnels. No matter what I did, I couldn't get away from it. The more I resisted, the more I thought about ice. And the more I thought about ice, the more I wanted it. I knew I had succumbed to something terrible, and in a bizarre twist of irony, the thing that was meant to serve as a distraction ended up being the reminder that I still had unfinished business. I also discovered something about myself while in the glaciate tunnels, something that I have been in denial about for quite some time. I was addicted to mining ice and was long overdue for some camaraderie. So, I did something I never thought I would do. I visited Leafman's Island again, but this time on my main account, and I left a message with his co-op member. About an hour later, I received the invite and was now a member of the Ice Addicts Guild. I never told Leafman I was sitting at 1 billion ice when I joined. The reason is because I wasn't sure how he would feel about a member of his guild having more ice than him. Seeing Reddit posts like this from a fellow guild member certainly didn't give me warm fuzzies about coming forward. In all seriousness though, the Ice Addicts weren't anything like I thought they'd be. They're actually pretty chill. Pun exceptionally intended. A few days later, a new update came to Skyblock, the Better Mayors update. The Better Mayors update introduced ministers to the game, revamped events, and came with a community center redesign. Foxy introduced the carnival, and one of the new items you could purchase was the Armadillo Mask, which increases mining fortune for non-ores by 50. Using this mask would bring my total mining fortune for non-ores up from 400 to 450. I bought the mask and used it for a couple of weeks until something better happened. Cole was elected mayor and introduced a new mining fiesta item called Glossy Gemstones. Glossy Gemstones can be used to upgrade mineral armor into glossy mineral armor. This new armor set grants 200 mining fortune for non-ores, and coupled with a snail pet would grant a total of 600 mining fortune for non-ores. While the first mining fiesta was active, I bought a stack of glossy gemstones from the bazaar for 200 million coins and crafted the set. It was an expensive purchase, but a necessary one as it increased my output in the icebox from 250,000 to 350,000 blocks of ice per hour. Things remained unchanged for a few months until something incredible happened. The Modernize Mining Update. What would be the turning point? The Modernize Mining Update brought significant changes to Skyblock. Mining fortune for non-ores was renamed to block fortune, and new types of fortunes were added to the game. Not only that, the snail pet was also reworked. Its slow and steady perk still worked the same, but it no longer had a block fortune cap. But the biggest change this update brought was mining fortune now works on all mineable blocks. This includes ice. This was the update I was needing, but to be completely transparent, I wasn't ready nor was I mentally prepared for the amount of work I was about to put in to accommodate for the changes. You see, prior to the modernized mining update, the two stats I only had to care about was speed and mining fortune for non-ores. Now I had more stats to take into consideration. It was a bit overwhelming, but with all these new changes, there was only one place to start. A couple of days later, I had enough gemstone powder to max out these perks in the heart of the mountain tree. Another small, subtle change that the modernized mining update brought was the diamondite reforged stone now gives block fortune that scales with rarity. This change no longer made the stonk the best choice for mining ice, but the pioneer pickaxe. So I bought a pioneer pickaxe from the auction house and retired my stonk. I already had all the talismans that grant speed, but I lacked the ones that offer mining fortune. The good news was there was only 3, but the bad news was it was going to be expensive to get. The first thing I did was I upgraded my mineral talisman into a glossy mineral talisman. Next, I forged a very expensive relic of power and applied all of the perfect gemstones to it to raise its rarity to legendary. Lastly, I acquired the magic 8-ball from the dark auction for 500 million coins. This was the easy part. Now came the hard part. You see, it's not possible to have max stats for all of these, so I had to find the most optimal setup to maximize my ice production. This is what I determined to be the best combination for mining ice. Now it was time to get the items. The first thing I did was I acquired a full set of Dwarven armor and maxed out the entire set. For equipment, I obtained this combination and reforged all 3 pieces with a blazing spear. The snail pet was still the best pet for mining ice, but I replaced the spooky cupcake on my snail pet with a quick claw, which grants 50 mining fortune. This new setup was optimizing my mining fortune, but I had lost a ton of speed in the process, and speed was still a necessary stat for my snail pet. To compensate for the loss of speed, I installed haste blocks in the icebox, which grants an additional 100 speed. But haste blocks weren't enough, and I needed more speed. My only other option for increasing speed is by increasing my magical power. Getting max magical power would be the way to go, but considering the accessories I lacked all cost hundreds of millions and some even billions of coins, I would have to save my coins and acquire the last of the talismans over time. For now, I recommed as many of my talismans that I could afford and applied the speed enrichment on my mythic and legendary accessories. My setup for mining ice was nearly optimized. However, there was one final item I needed. The Pendant of Dwarven is the best necklace in the game for mining fortune, but the problem was it's extremely difficult to get. For one, you need Heart of the Mountain 10, which fortunately I already had. The Pendant of Dwarven is forged from a shattered locket, which can only be obtained by looting Vanguard corpses in the mineshafts. If this sounds easy, trust me, it's not. Mineshaft portals have a 1 in 2,000 chance of spawning by mining blocks in the glaciate tunnels. However, there are 16 different mineshafts that can spawn, and the Vanguard corpse can only be found in the Fairy Mineshaft. Even if RNG blesses you with a Fairy Mineshaft, you're still not guaranteed to get the Shattered Locket. You have to loot the Vanguard corpse with a very expensive skeleton key, and the locket has a 1 in 123 chance of dropping from the corpse. Essentially, you need a lot of luck and a ton of patience. Because I was using minion expanders and tasty cheese on my ice minions, I wasn't using my flycatchers and plasma buckets and hadn't been for quite some time. So I sold them to the bazaar and bought a shattered locket from the auction house for a whopping 1.4 billion coins and forged it into a pendant of Dwarven. With a pendant of Dwarven now in my possession, I was stacked and was ready to take up ice mining again. With this new setup, I started mining ice in the ice box again and was averaging 1 million blocks of ice per hour. Some days I would mine 8 million blocks of ice. On a good day, 10 million blocks of ice. I kept this up until on Christmas Day of 2024, I crossed the next major milestone, 2 billion ice. I was still number 2 in ice, but my confidence was at an all-time high. I reached 2 billion in just a fraction of the time it took me to reach 1 billion, so I knew it was only a matter of time before I caught up. And a matter of time was only 2 weeks away. It was January 8th, 2025. It was an ordinary day in Skyblock. I was mining ice like usual and stopped to check my ice collection. This is what happened. No way. No way. I actually did it. Let's go! Let's go! Yes, it's over! 2 years and 2.1 billion blocks of ice later, I'd finally done it and was number 1 in ice collection. After gathering the ice reserves for my minions and granting all 31 of them free will, it was time for me to come forward to the guild. Much to my surprise, the reception I received wasn't cold. It was unexpectedly warm. The players I once thought of as rivals turned out to be allies, and what I thought would be a competitive battle for the number 1 spot became something much more meaningful. A shared effort to bring the ice community together and to revive Skyblock's largest ice guild. I had always believed that reaching the top of a collection would make me a target, but I was wrong. Instead, I found acceptance and a welcoming community filled with some of the coolest people in Skyblock. Sure, I could have pursued a different leaderboard, but in the end, I'm glad I chose this block. This guild and this community is where I'm proud to belong. And that, my friends, is the story of how I became number 1 in ice collection. So you might be wondering, what's next for JayJen? In fact, a player by the name of Weehoo asked me this very question. For the first time in a very long time, I had no idea, and I felt no sense of urgency. I had plenty of time to figure out what was next. Actually, now that I think of it, there is one thing that I've been wanting to do for quite some time.